Thank you for joining us today and for submitting your questions in advance. We've received a lot of questions from our customers wondering what other institutions are doing to tackle COVID-19 related challenges and what initiatives they've implemented. So we've decided to host this forum to give you insight gathered from our customers and also from our students. Before I introduce our three hosts, I would like to suggest using the chat function to submit your questions or comments and keep the conversation going. If you have a specific initiative you would like to share with us, please message me privately on the chat function as well. Our three hosts today are Eric Harrell, CEO of Keystone Academic Solutions, Professor Espen Andersen from BI Norwegian Business School, and also a board member of Keystone Academic Solutions, and Fabien Millard, our SVP Customer Success. We'll also be joined later on by Michal Gallet for the Q&A section of the forum. He's the Vice Dean of International Relations at Shafarik University. But first, let's welcome Eric Harrell. Eric, can you hear me?
Okay, all right, let's start again here. I thought I was unmuted. Anyway, welcome everyone to our webinar today. It's great to have you. I hope that everyone is coping well, or as well as can be expected, given the situation that is affecting all of us around the world. So what I'm going to cover today is basically just one. We've obviously been talking to a lot of our customers and partners over the last weeks. I'll go through some of the trends that we're seeing after those conversations, and then go through some of the initiatives that many of these institutions are taking, given these circumstances. And then I'll go through some statistics that we have found that we have from our various web properties. We have millions of students coming to our properties every month. So we have some interesting statistics to share with you. And then we've also done a poll. We've got some poll data from 7,000 students over a 36-hour period regarding how they perceive the situation. And then we'll move to Professor Andersen and get his perspective. He's a professor at the Norwegian Business School in Oslo with over 20,000 students, one of the largest business schools in Europe. And we'll get some perspective from him on how he's, as a professor, is dealing with this in terms of teaching, how it's affecting teaching now, how he expects it to affect teaching going forward, and then also just give you some interesting perspectives on sort of the how the business school is seeing things from a trend standpoint. So he has some interesting statistics to share with you, both from the Norwegian Business School. He's also teaches at the University of Oslo. So why don't we just I'll jump right into, and then we'll go into a Q&A session from there. So let me talk a little bit about the trends. So I think probably the most obvious trend is really uncertainty. Many universities, many institutions, many of us have never experienced anything like this, of course. So we know that institutions are losing revenue, lost revenue. This is a case, particularly in the United States, with schools that have to refund room and board. The sporting events aren't happening. Sports is a big deal for many U.S. universities, so this is also lost revenue. And then, of course, there's concern about projected lost revenue. What happens? How many students will return in the fall? What will the dropout rate be? Will students choose a gap year before starting to matriculate during the year? Do students choose cheaper institutions due to the macro uncertainty? What happens if international students cannot get visas? Many have wanted to, want to study overseas for that on-campus experience, and these students tend to pay higher rates in many markets. And then we're also seeing that many students are demanding discounts if the online studies continue, because there is a gap between the value that they perceive an on-campus education brings versus an online education. So that's also a factor. And then, of course, summer school, summer programs are being affected, and that affects revenue. So big picture, I think it's fair to say the most obvious trend is just uncertainty. When will institutions reopen, and how does that affect institutions from a financial standpoint? The second, of course, a very obvious phenomenon which is going on today is this massive move towards online education. I mean, nothing like this has ever happened before. So you see this massive move towards online education. In many cases today, it's a replication of the existing class experience where maybe a professor is teaching in front of an empty classroom, and then it's done online. And Professor Anderson has some very interesting perspectives on this because he's a professor and is coping with this now. Many institutions are also, we're seeing among our customers, are putting more marketing money towards online programs in this environment. So this is something that we see with our customers, particularly those who have a large online footprint. Another thing that we see is that some institutions are extending the admission deadlines. Some are looking at deferring the start of the fall semester, maybe from August to September or August to October, as the probability of an on-campus start looks less and less likely. But we also have institutions that we've spoken to who are trying to avoid changing the start date by promoting online as a way to bridge for international students until normalcy returns. So I think, to summarize, uncertainty obviously is a big trend. We're seeing this massive move towards online education, which is very interesting. It has some implications. And then we're seeing how different universities are coping with this, either extending start dates of school or starting things with online. Now, when it comes to how our partners are, what kinds of initiatives are implementing to cope with this from a communication standpoint. And communication now is, of course, more important than ever, particularly since the offline part has really been eliminated from the equation. And so I think the overreaching theme that we see really is that there's more, our institutions are needing to and wanting to communicate more than ever. And there's a much more digital focus. And given the environment, given the fact that there is this uncertainty and nervousness out there, that frequent communication is more important than ever. And digital, where students are and how they can be accessed at this point, it's online, it's digital. So I think, big picture, communication with existing students and prospective students is extremely important, of course, to ensure that enrollments are as good as they can be entering the new academic year. Now let's talk a little bit about what channels are being used to reach students in this environment. I think the biggest thing we see is social media is become an even bigger channel for many institutions. Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, even TikTok as well, higher frequency. We see many institutions, customers sponsoring webinars. We see higher participation in virtual student fairs since the virtual, sort of the on sort of campus or the face-to-face webinar virtual fairs are not, student fairs are not possible. We're seeing institutions organize virtual campus tours. We're seeing more direct email marketing campaigns and outreach as part of the need for more communication. And of course, with face-to-face meetings not possible in student fairs, we're actually seeing more interest in digital recruiting channels. So from existing customers, so more demand for digital recruiting channels like ourselves from existing customers, but also new customers. This has been a phenomenon that we've seen since the COVID-19 issue has cropped up. And we also see that many institutions are expanding the target geographies in terms of looking for prospective students as well. So in summary, much greater use of digital channels to reach students. That's kind of the big trend. communication with existing and prospective students that way. And we're also seeing that there's much greater emphasis on nurturing the students, the prospective students, through the funnel, through hopefully enrollment, than before. When it comes to marketing, communication, and tone, this is something which just pervades all of the digital channels that I just went through. So I think we're seeing a greater focus on authenticity. We see institutions using, university leaders to communicate directly.
你飲乜水未？喝水了嗎？ Water 啦。
We're seeing university leaders communicate directly to existing and prospective students by using YouTube or video content in general. So putting, a face of a leader, talking directly to new students or existing students. We're seeing video sharing on social media. That could be university employees and also existing students creating user-generated content, really putting a face behind the message. And there's also a focus on transparency and honesty in this environment, really being straightforward about the situation, but also showing a caring, understanding attitude, because there are students who, of course, are affected by this on maybe on a personal level. So even in these times, and even in the age of transparency, honesty, I think what we see is institutions are emphasizing a positive and uplifting message that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I think it's a way to reassure students that we will get back to normalcy at some point soon. So I think another thing, of course, is frequency of communication is more important than ever, and also quick response times. So that's some high-level messages in terms of what we're seeing in terms of institutions and how they're responding to things and how they're dealing and working with students from a communication standpoint. So now with more discussion about trends and also initiatives, I'd like to segue to what we're seeing on traffic standpoint. So from a traffic standpoint, if we could put up we should see a presentation come up. Terrific. And what we're seeing there is that these are basically the trends that we're seeing on our traffic, on our sites, our extensive properties, from 4 to 15 millions of students coming here, prospective students coming here every month. Really, since March, you see that big dip, and that was when COVID-19 hit, but there's been a rebound. What we saw is that basically we got hit, the master studies got particularly hit during that period, bachelor studies less so. On the other hand, we see that online has increased. And this is on that point about online, you can see how this is an index of Google searches over the last 12 months. The blue is online degrees and the red is master's degrees. And you can see how searches for online have actually trended up. You had a big dip on the red, which is master studies, and it's rebounded, but still it's down from where it was. If we move on to our student poll, and this really supports the points. This is the 7,000 students I was referring to before. You can see in some of the details. If we move to the next slide, we see that 61% of the students are intending to change their study plans since COVID-19. So that's something that we all need to pay attention to. And we see that 57% are considering online programs that are on-campus programs. And that is very much supportive of what we have seen in our own website statistics and in terms of the searches being done on Google. And then I think this is also a very interesting statistic that of these 7,000 students, 75% are open to starting their semester online until the travel restrictions are lifted. And I think that's also a very positive trend for admissions officers that students are open, many students or most students are open to some kind of online bridge until things get back to normalcy and they can actually go on campus. And then when it comes to the social media channels, we're seeing that Instagram and YouTube and Facebook are the most used social media channels since COVID-19. So that's the summarizes kind of the trends that we see. in the market. I think probably the biggest trend, as I mentioned, is sort of the online move, and also student receptivity to doing things online until things return to normalcy. So now I think I'd like to segue to Professor Anderson to say a few words about his perspective on teaching in this environment, and where he sees teaching going in this environment, and as a result of this, and also he has some very interesting data and insights from the Norwegian Business School.
Thank you, Eric. I trust everybody can hear me okay. Let's see. I teach strategy and technology at BI Norwegian Business School, which is one of the largest business schools in Europe, about 20,000 students. And I also teach computer science at the University of Oslo, the Institute of Computer Science there. And that is also a large university, around 30,000 students, I believe. Well, there are several things to this I'd like to talk about. I can talk a little bit about the experience of going online. Contrary to most of my colleagues, I've been doing online teaching with video conferencing for about 25 years. I set up a transatlantic course on digital business strategy in, I think, '96. And working together with universities in the States. So when this happened, for me and for those relatively few of my colleagues that had that experience, it was mainly business as usual, or mainly doing something that had been a side activity as the main activity. For most of my colleagues, it has been an enormous undertaking. And we've seen tremendous amount of work from people to get online. I'm quite impressed. There's a bit sort of what took you so long in all this, but I'm quite impressed by how hard people have been working to do it. I see some differences in how the schools respond to it from a top management perspective. For the public schools in Norway, there has been more of a delay. As soon as the schools were shut down, most of the public schools that are publicly funded took a week without any teaching at all in order to shut some things down and start doing. Whereas the schools that are private and who largely make their money from student tuition didn't have that luxury and basically started cold. What people have been doing is taking what they're currently doing and moving it online. So we've had teachers standing in classrooms and talking into a camera with no students present. And then what we probably will be seeing as we go forward is that after that initial first phase has kind of ended, perhaps with the semester, it was towards the end of the semester. So for most people, it is an existing course and you continue. There is now a lot of planning for the next semester. At the business school, we have been told to prepare for a third of our teaching to be online because the authorities will probably open up classrooms, but will allow much less student density. So we have to prepare for at least a third of our courses being online. And for some activities, I'm teaching a course in China right now. I switched the whole thing to go online because it's very unlikely that I will be allowed to go there in the early fall. So we're seeing a substitution phase. In the second phase, we will probably see an increased emphasis on trying to change what we're doing to adapt more to the technology. And for most people, that will involve producing videos and having the students see them, and then trying to have interaction with the students. Just to give you a thought about this, because in the late 1990s, I did a seminar with a professor at MIT named Tom Malone. And the way we did it was he sent over a video, which was an hour long, of a speech he'd made. We then, was a group of executives, about 12 people. We then had a discussion about what he said in that video, and then Tom came on in a video conference. And the effect made an impression on me because for the students, it was an experience of having 3 hours with Tom alone. For Tom, it was the experience of having an hour's discussion with very motivated and well-prepared participants. So I think, as we move this online, we can develop, and I think, the differentiator will be between the universities who take this situation and just do what they're currently doing online, and those that actually adapt their teaching to the new situation. And this, so, and we'll probably see a lot of innovation there. And I've seen universities here in Norway do both things. I would please do not come out with decisions from central about how the teaching is going to be done. I think it's paramount that universities trust the people that teach to be able to come up with how to do the teaching. Because we already seen some fairly major conflicts between teaching faculty and central management, who have a tendency to say, everybody should do it this way, and then not understand the many sort of local situations, different courses, different student groups, and so on and so forth. And so I think it's paramount that universities trust the people at the front line to do the innovation and make the tools and the possibilities available to them. In the longer term, whenever we have a new technology coming in like this, we go through phases, and the first phase is substitution. That's what we're seeing now. We take what we have and put it online. The second way is adaptation. We change what we do to work with the new tool, which means that to a larger extent, you will separate presentation and interaction. I certainly, from my experience with video conferencing, have found that you can do a video conference as a presentation or as an interaction, but if you try to mix both, you put the students in a very passive mode, and then it's hard to engage them. So, which means that, you should probably start to do videos with content and use video conferencing in real time for what you can only do in real time, which is interaction. So that will put very high importance on having faculty that can drive interaction. You have to change your courses so that the students will focus on the problem at hand, where they sort of, you get them to understand that learning what is there is not just simply to get a grade, but in order to learn a skill, or to learn to cope with a problem, or to learn an important piece of content well. So that's going to place a premium on good teachers. And we're probably going to see a lot more differentiation here. Some people will work in this new environment and thrive. Some people will probably feel very, very frustrated. Longer term, universities will have to change their processes, both internally, but also they will have to change their business models. And there we see some differences. One of the things I have found when I do videos and then do interaction is that it takes me, to create a 1-hour video of fairly high quality with editing and preparation and so on, will take me at least 2 days of quite intense work. So all the work is in creation of the video, which then, of course, can be played over and over again at a much higher productivity. You can show it to many more students. But that has very interesting ramifications for how you pay faculty, because most schools now let faculty do the teaching part of their duties by counting off the number of hours they are in the classroom, or the number of students they advise, or something like that. All measures that are very focused on the physical activity as kind of the base unit. You get paid by the number of hours you teach. And that is going to have to change. So that's going to be a major headache, how to switch that around and pay people appropriately. A very interesting discussion that's going to come up quite fast is intellectual property rights. In most countries, the faculty that creates a video have the property right to that video. And when good teachers suddenly can teach anywhere in the world, we're going to see some very, very interesting competitive dynamics come up. And by the way, if you take a look at universities now, it certainly is something that I've seen as a board member in Keystone. If you look at the various universities, or I can just go to Norway, we have, well, let's see, 6, 7 universities in Norway of various sizes and specialties. Their main differentiator between universities is not what they do, but where they are, regional, or which city they're in. Are you in Oslo, Bergen, Stavanger, Trondheim, and so on and so forth? There is some specialization towards technical subjects somewhere, maybe more towards education somewhere else, nursing. But if you, to make it very brutal, if you go to your website and you take away where you are and what language you speak or you teach in, what is left that identifies you uniquely? And I think a lot of universities are going to have to think very hard about that, because in an online world where the teachers are paid to create the content and there is fantastic productivity in the distribution of the content, we're going to see much more international competition. And that means that students who previously thought about taking a degree at the local university now maybe take an online degree, and then they say, well, wait a second, why do I need to take it at the local university or a certain place? I can do it at Harvard or MIT or Stanford or London Business School or wherever. So you're going to tend to see that when a market goes global, the people that are in the middle are suffering. And it goes towards, even more localized or even more international. And you're probably going to see a sort of split more and more there. As for economics, the numbers are quite interesting. We recently got the admissions numbers, both for the university I teach at, University of Oslo, and for BI Norwegian Business School. And the numbers are solidly up. I believe the figure is 38% for the bachelor programs at our business school. They are in the same range for our master's program. We're a Bologna school, 3+2. I don't have the precise numbers for the universities, but they are significantly higher, and there is a shift towards the harder sciences. And what I think we're seeing is that students who previously thought they were going to have a gap year now think, well, I'm not going to be able to find a job. I certainly can't travel around the world and relax and have an adventure. Well, let's start my bachelor program. So we are seeing very high increases in application numbers in Norway. I don't know if that is true other places in Europe. I don't know. And I also don't know what the situation is with international students. I certainly know that we are making all the master's courses, which are taught in English, available for international students to follow from the beginning of the semester. In terms of economics, it's an interesting situation, and I think the situation is quite different in Europe and Asia and the United States. In Europe, when you go to a university, there are relatively few services provided by the university. You don't have room and board. You don't have lavish sports facilities. You don't have park-like universities. Everything is more utilitarian. The university provides the teaching and not much else. Also, to a large extent, education is state or publicly funded, which means that the private schools that are there are quite cheap. In the United States, the situation is quite different. Education is very expensive and something you save to do your whole life. If you look at the online prices, they are not that different. So I think, I know that even the most prestigious schools, I was on a conference with the Harvard Business School a couple of weeks ago, are getting demands from students that they get their tuition fees refunded because they're not getting the high-priced on-campus experience that they expected. They're taking very good online programs, but it is not the same. And the price differential can be as much as 80%, so an 80% rebate. And I think a lot of universities and business schools in the United States are going to face some fairly hard cost choices when the fall comes. In Europe, the situation is not that dire. First of all, applications are up. Secondly, the price differential between online and on-campus programs is not that big. So it doesn't matter so much. There, I'm more worried for a number of schools when the geographical differentiation is no longer there. You can take an online program from anywhere in the world. Well, Eric, I have been rambling on for a long time.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for all those fantastic insights, from real world experience. Maybe we could move to the Q&A, and I encourage you, I know that we've had one question on the chat, but please feel free, others who would like to get some questions answered. We have some questions that we've collated, amalgamated ahead of this webinar, and why don't we just go to the first question. So this is coming from Chantal Daman, Rotterdam School of Management. How do you stand out in the crowd? Everybody's trying to reach candidates during this difficult time with ads and email. Their minds are not on studying right now. How do you reach them? What type of messaging? So I think this is a good question for Michelle and also for Professor Anderson to address.
Well, I give the word to Professor Anderson first. He has much more experience, and then I can add our view, if you agree, or?
Well, I'm happy to start because that gives me the opportunity to do the big picture, and then when it comes to competence, it's your turn, right? So, this is a very hard thing, because so far what we've been doing in the universities is taking students we already have and transiting them to online, and everybody's doing their best, and it's kind of working. The question is, it's okay to do a video conference with somebody you already know. How do you initiate that experience, and how do you get them to come in? And I think I have a long background in consulting, so my best answer would be to focus on what you can do for students in this situation. An argument like now is the time to do education. It's almost contrarian, right? But when the job market goes down, there's a certain level of it goes against the trend, so that, when the job market goes down, the education market goes up because people are seeking that safe harbor. So that might be one way of thinking about it. In terms of individual differentiation, I think that's a really hard question, and it will necessitate taking a hard look at what you do, making a decision about what is marketable in a world where people are more equal, and then focus on that, and that will mean prioritizing down some things that you are currently doing, which perhaps is not that different anymore. So that would be sort of my big message. Over to the more practical things, Michelle, what are you doing?
Hello, thank you for the word. I have to first introduce where I'm from. I'm now representing a regional, let's say local university from Eastern Slovakia, in Košice, which name is very complicated for non-natives. It's Pavol Jozef Šáfarik University. Anyway, I'm from the Faculty of Science. And in regard to, we have about 1,000 students, 200 of them is doctoral students, teaching chemistry, biology, mathematics, information science, geoinformatics, geography, physics. So basically natural sciences. And the first information I gave you that we are standard university in Slovakia, we don't really stand out of the crowd, and this is really our task now to go ahead and provide something special. And we are trying to find the right way. In terms of towards international students, I don't have a recipe or approach how to do it. I would rather hear the experience of others. But maybe towards domestic students, we try to promote or to take this topic of COVID and coronavirus disease and crisis, and to explain some background issues, for example, towards secondary grammar school students. So we are trying to attract them, at least for natural science in the general, and then at the end maybe to come to Košice, to our university. So we are promoting little videos, short videos, explaining what is virus, how the disinfection works, what you need to do in such a crisis, also from a legal perspective, how the COVID disease is going to spread in the near future. So how is done data modeling, that's from mathematics point of view. So these are little short stories which we present on YouTube, on Facebook, Instagram, trying to attract attention towards our faculty and our study programs. That's perhaps all I can say to this question, if you find it useful.
And if I may add, hello, this is Fabian from Keystone. If I may add to this particular question, what Chantal asked was like, everybody's trying to reach the students right now, one way or another. How do you stand out? But as Eric also mentioned earlier, there is actually a really strong need from the student side to receive communication. Just as I think also as a community of people working in the education sector, we also have a much higher need to communicate at the moment. So there's definitely no problem, I think, to reach out to and be heard by students. Of course, it's important to choose the right means. We covered also earlier that social media are really important. Video content is key. What we see also, if you're having trouble reaching out to new prospective students for your programs, shift maybe your attention more to the ones that have already sent an application or shown interest in your programs, and spend more resources on nurturing those. We had also in the earlier webinar some participants who said they did that. They allocated, for example, students, but also admissions staff to spend more time on the existing applicants and nurture them and see if they could convert them to a program that maybe initially will start online, but the students will really appreciate that and will help you to get up the conversion rate on the students that have already contacted you. And then we have, I think on a similar note, I think Espen covered that, and I think also Michelle said a little bit about this. How can you differentiate yourself? You really have to think hard about differentiating yourself, not just with your geography and maybe your campus, but also with what you can offer with your programs.
If I may add something, Fabian, I think, what Michel is talking about, I think is very, very important. He is from a university that has a sort of technical bent, mathematics, informatics, geoinformatics, things like that. Whenever the job market is insecure, there is a turn towards the harder sciences. I think you're in a very, very good position. But I find this idea of taking, showcasing the knowledge that's inside the university, making that available and putting it into the context that we're going through right now, I think is very, very important. Like sort of, doing YouTube videos, for instance, I think is a fantastic way of showing that you can do something. And I think the differentiator will be that some universities already have done this. There is, just reminded me, there is a channel on YouTube called Computer File, P-H-I-L-E. I'll put it in the chat. And it's the University of Nottingham, and it's the computer science department, and they are explaining computer science concepts. And when the YouTube, when the COVID-19 situation came, they're doing explanations for, you know, the flattening of the curve and all that stuff in terms of the tools they're using. So they're showcasing the people that are there, explaining concepts to the students. I'd be very surprised if they didn't see their applications numbers go up, because they could show something that's interesting and useful and very contextual. So I think that's the right way to think, you know, what they are doing.
Actually, if I just can confirm what you have just said, that it really works, that we really didn't make anything special, just a short video, maybe 2 minutes. It's more animation than a video. And the attraction it got on Facebook, natural, like organic, within Slovakia, it was very good. Several 10,000s of people were reached without any promotion, financial promotion on Facebook. So if you really hit the nail with the hammer, it really works, and you can attract the attention. After that, you can serve another information to the prospective students.
Well, you know, when times are good, people want to hear the message about how fun it is to go to the university. You'll get new friends, you'll party a lot and things like that. I don't think that's the right marketing message in these times. Perhaps it's more like, here you can learn something that's really useful and very relevant to the situation. I think that is absolutely the right way to go.
Okay, this is great. Fantastic insights from the three of you. Why don't we move on to the next question? This is from Joanna Ariaitio from Universidad de Westo. Which are the markets that might offer new opportunities? I think it's referring to more like geographic markets. And I think it's, you know, Espen or Michelle or Fabian. Just put it out there.
Yeah, so what we have identified with our customers is, and different institutions that we work with, is that it's probably still a little bit early to identify truly new markets, and that so far actually the previous trends are still valid, especially when it comes, for example, to African students and online programs. Has been a trend for some time, and perhaps online programs is becoming more of a trend also in other areas, but that's what we've seen so far. I don't know if Michelle or Espen, if you have seen anything else.
Well, I can confirm we use the service of Keystone Academic Solutions for promoting five postgraduate programs since this March, so it's very fresh, 2 months. And from observing the student leads who is communicating with us, I just confirmed that yes, the African countries and the Asian countries, especially India, the region of India, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and those countries, those are the markets or the destinations where we got the queries from to study for PhD, but I can say nothing about bachelor's or master's study.
Well, from my perspective, I don't have much to do with geographic recruiting in the places I teach. In general, I think, you know, a lot of universities are going to look at markets they previously didn't consider to be markets. I teach technology strategy, and there is a concept of disruption. And disruption doesn't mean that, you know, just like now the markets are going to pieces. A disruption is when you are, or a disruptive innovation is when you're being invaded. Somebody is taking away your market. And they're doing it with a technology or a way of doing things that's worse than what you're doing. So, you know, what's happening now is that online, which has been kind of the poor cousin for many schools, not all, has been, you know, is coming and taking a larger market share. But they tend to take it from the students who are, you know, most universities that are very high prestige, they want on-campus students that are very smart and pay a lot of money. And you know, if you're that kind of student, you want the on-campus experience. So Harvard and Stanford and London Business School and INSEAD will do fine, even in the longer term. but online, you know, is kind of creeping up, is getting better and better and better. And I think, you know, if you're thinking about expanding your online presence, you will need to start looking at student populations that you previously hadn't thought were yours. And I think a lot of schools are going to, you know, find that they will need to provide programs for a wider cohort of students of more varying quality and location and background.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's move on to the next question. And this is from Sierra Marqueta. This is a more specific question. Which virtual fairs for recruiting do you recommend?
Yeah, I can say a few things about that, and please share in the chat if you have also other examples that work, and then we'll share also our examples as well in the chat. So what we have been aware of before and in these times is for example, Univer as a supplier of virtual fairs where students can, you know, visit either a campus or a booth of your university virtually. Also, an established provider is Access Online from the Advent Group, which probably many of you know. They are usually quite present also at educational events and conferences. College Week Live in the US especially is one that we are aware of and that has worked with us in the past. And FPPU Edu Media, they have two different platforms, one called Virtual Fairs and the other Student World, that seem to be quite widely used, and also Unibuddy.
Any perspectives on this, Michelle, from your end? Experience with virtual fairs?
Thank you. I have just learned many new resources, so no, I have nothing to add. I'm really fresh in this from this point of view.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think as I mentioned at the outset, I mean, this is obviously an obvious big new trend now, given that the face-to-face fairs aren't possible at this stage. Okay, well, thanks for that. Let's move to the next question. Yes, this is coming from Mirko Pedersen. How should we communicate with prospective students about COVID-19? How should we deal with all the uncertainty regarding this topic? Maybe Michelle, you could start things off on this one for us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, I can say what we did is pretty much very similar to other universities in the world. Immediately, we are at home or closed from 10th of March. And since that time, there were 4 or 5 updates of the rector's, let's say, orders or the guidelines, what to do. And from the very first week, we decided not to postpone any dates. So we remained stuck with the original plan for the academic year. But we decided, of course, to provide distance teaching, and there was no presence in the premises of the university allowed for the students and very limited for the employees. And maybe to answer this question more specifically, what I have observed with our employees, our academic staff, and also the students, everybody required certain information, and not certain, to make them sure that things will be, for example, like this. For example, they don't mind the distance teaching or these video conferencing issues, but they wanted to know, for example, when the state exams are going to be organized, or when and what will be the approach after the lockdown is stopped or ceased. So I recommend to give the people, the students and the employees, some kind of certainty that things will be done like this, and not to make them unsure what is going to happen. That's our approach.
Fabian, would you like to provide some insight here on this one?
No, I mean, I think we what's important is what also Michelle said. It's just share what you have implemented so far and be clear in communicating everything that is happening, because there is a lot of uncertainty that need that kind of communication.
Yeah, and I think as I mentioned, what we see is just the frequency of communication now is more important than ever, and bringing that authenticity to the message. And we see institutions, using their, university president or leaders to really talk directly to prospective students and existing students, and then using user-generated content, videos from admission officers or from existing students to really make it real. But I think the four things that takeaways from talking to customers is authenticity, transparency, a caring attitude, and also keeping things positive. Those are sort of the four key things that we've learned from talking to our partners about this. Okay, let's move on to the next question, Fabian. How do other schools tailor their sites, messages, or communication to indicate that there is a language requirement? So maybe, Michelle, would you like to start us off on that one?
I can be very quick with this. We don't require any language certificate for none of the levels of students, bachelor's, master's, or PhDs. It's with PhD students or the applicants, it is easier because everybody has to pass an interview, for example, like a video conference, and there we can see if we can communicate, and if we can communicate okay during this interview, we expect it will be all right during the study. So we are not under this kind of pressure of requiring certificates for language. That's all.
Yeah, what we see is that a lot of these providers are scrambling also to offer testing from home options instead of testing, for example, in testing centers, like what has been common in the past. We know that GRE and TOEFL, they have a testing from home option ready already, and GMAT should go online any day now as well if they haven't done so yet. We also see alternatives coming like Duolingo, and also some universities have said that they have relaxed temporarily a little bit their requirements and are accepting unofficial transcripts, for example, from a local English school or something like that.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Thanks, both of you. How will the COVID-19 crisis affect visa procedures for international students?
Yeah, if I can
jump in, please.
I just received an email. It's really very fresh from the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs of the Slovak Republic. Not saying much about it actually. The answer was that they don't have any special regulations or guidelines for this. They just expect and hope that everything will be soon in the same, how to say, everything will be done in the same way as it was before the crisis. Sorry, I need to start again my thoughts. That we can admit students now, it's not a problem, we can do it online. The academic year starts in September, we don't know what is going to happen by that time. If the student cannot come because of the customs or the borders are still closed, we can provide online teaching, or we can do it online. The student can be still admitted to study to any Slovak university. But if the restrictions on traveling would last for longer, then our Ministry of Foreign Affairs doesn't know what, at the moment, that they don't know what will be the guidelines. So that's all I can say from our perspective. They are actually directing me towards the Ministry of Internal Affairs, which is responsible for the borders, customs, and they are still locked, and I have not contacted them yet. So it's pretty much uncertain what is going to happen. But as you have said, we have to be transparent and sort of easy thinking, or being positive with this and encouraging students to study and to submit the documents and being admitted.
And just to add briefly to what Michelle said, of course, yeah, the online is probably a good way to get this started if they can't travel yet. What you can also anticipate is that some students will have troubles just getting the visa because they have to travel to a neighboring country, to an embassy to get the process going. And they may not be able to travel across borders because of the current restrictions. So this may drag on quite for some time for some students who live maybe in smaller countries where there's no embassy from your country where your university is.
I can just add that we decided, yes, to take the student even in October or November, whenever he or she is, she has all the documents ready, because normally it takes 3 or 4 months for the third countries, not from EU, and we accept even later submission of all documents, basically, after they get the visa.
Okay, and on this point, we have a question coming in from Isabella. The question is, admission requirements. Our mission requirement so far requires our starters to be on site. How can we organize long distance enrollments? Ideas on that front? Any comments on how to organize that?
From our perspective, we are a small faculty. I mean, at the moment, the number of applications for bachelor and master study counts to about 600. We don't have. I mean, we take the students based on the marks or the assessment from the secondary school. In none of the programs we require any testing or any tests, basically. It is different for medicine, for example, or other study programs, but not on our faculty. To be honest, I'm not sure how they are going to deal with this, but it can be managed online. The problem is the plagiarism, or how they are going to control that the student has nobody else at him. This is tough. For the moment, we were organizing or publishing guidelines for distant conducting distance examination. In Slovakia, there is state exam after 3 or 2 years of master's or 3 years of bachelor study. You need to pass state exams. There is a committee of 5 members, and every student has to be present. But at the moment, he or she will not be present. We will do it by video conference, but this is also challenging. It is possible. They are not the numbers are not large, but I have no advice from our side for testing large number of applicants for being admitted for a study.
Okay.
Just on a generic level here, that I think you need to sort of think hard about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then sort of decompose. If there's something that absolutely requires people to be physically present, well, you'll just have to postpone that until they can come, and then do as much as possible. I've had situations where I've had to have students do exams in person, and one way of doing it is simply set up a video conference. I did it to my office. I had 3 students, one in Blue and a couple other places, and they were doing the exam while they were in a video conference with me. They couldn't see me, so obviously they thought that I was watching them all the time. I was doing nothing of the sort. But you can do a whole lot of things. There will certainly be, for instance, in terms of academic honesty, cheating in an online environment, you need different control procedures. I think just rethink things and be sensible. And then if rules say something, well, rules can change, and the situation is quite extreme. So you need to go back and say, why is that rule in place? And can we achieve what was intended with the rule by doing things in a different way?
Okay. Thank you. I wish we could continue for another hour, but we're now we're up. The hour is up. I want to thank Michelle and Espen and Fabian and all of you for participating. Thank you for submitting the questions. Thank you for submitting questions on the chat. And also thanks all of you for sharing your insights as well on chat to sort of help provide insights for everyone else. So thanks everyone. We wish you all the best. Stay safe and wish you all the best with admissions and enrollments in the new academic year. Thank you.